Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio Live with you this evening. What night are we on? Thursday night. It's really looking forward to this conversation tonight. We're going to be talking all things imposter syndrome in education. It's such a big topic. There's so much we're going to cover on it. And I'm going to be joined by Thomas in a moment. I'll let Thomas introduce himself in a bit. Before we get into that, well, first of all, thank you for joining us. If you're watching this back, thanks for clicking play on this. We really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to it as a podcast, if that's what you're doing. These shows wouldn't be possible without the support of our amazing sponsors. So I thought it would be a good time to kick off by thanking them. And the first one I'd like to thank is Hachette Learning, who support all our shows at Teachers Talk Radio. If you haven't heard of Hachette Learning, formerly known as John Catt Educational, they are leading providers of professional books and resources around the world. You can get their books and resources delivered to you in any school, in any country, whether you work domestically or internationally. Always available, incredible range of titles. We've interviewed many authors from Hachette on Teachers Talk Radio over the last few years. We've had a great time doing that. It's been fantastic. So yeah, check out the website and get involved. The other one I wanted to mention was AQA. Now, AQA know teachers are the real experts in class, and that's why they work closely with teachers like you, combining their insights with assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that does make a difference. And they're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you've probably already heard of them. Now, for the new school year, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel more supported and ready. You can find out more by simply Googling AQA We Work with Experts to find out more about what AQA are offering for this academic year. Now, Thomas, when did you start back at school?
This is my second week, Tom.
Second week? Yeah. Week 2, I think I'm on week 2. Maybe 3. I don't know. No, we had inset, so yeah. Week two. Yeah, how are you finding it? All right? Are you still alive?
Still alive, hanging in there. I actually worked in Dubai for the last 2 years. So we finished the school year in June, at the end of June. So I had 2 months out of the classroom. So by the time September rolled around, I was pretty pleased to be back and catch up with my colleagues.
Fantastic. Well, listen, today we're going to talk about imposter syndrome in education. So a good place to start is to ask you, what is imposter syndrome? Oh, well, first of all, tell us about your role. Tell us a little bit about your role now. What you're doing now.
Sure, no problem. My role now, I work at a small Catholic secondary school in North Birmingham. My title is Raising Standards Leader. Largely that relates to improving the standards that we have in place in our pastoral leadership, Tom. What I've really been tasked with this year is opening up our school's internal alternative provision. So trying to make sure that those learners for whom school life is really difficult have the right support in place to reintegrate back into our own classrooms at our school over a period of time. This is a school I worked at for 7 years previously, but like I said, I've just got back from a 2-year stint in Dubai, where I was an assistant head teacher. Again, worked a lot on the pastoral side of leadership, with some academic leadership as well. I worked with the creative arts department at the school I was working in. I think
it's always a compliment when a teacher wants to go back to a school they've previously worked in. I think
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
big
yeah.
for any
Yeah, I
school.
totally agree. I'd had a really good time. I'd been at the school for 7 years. The head teacher who I worked with then is still the head teacher now. So I had a great time. He always said, if you decide to come back to the UK, give me a shout and we'll see what we can do. And lo and behold, there was an opportunity for me to go in and do some really good work. So looking forward to it and pleased to be back.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, let's talk about imposter syndrome then. What is imposter syndrome? Let's start with that. What in your view is it? Because I'm sure there's numerous definitions.
Yeah, there's such a huge amount of research on this. And if you do a simple Google search or you look on YouTube, you'd be amazed at the amount of research and thinking that there is around it. But essentially, Tom, imposter syndrome is something that we've probably all felt. I would suggest that 100% of people have felt it at some point. And it's the idea that in a given situation, we are undeserving or do not have the tools to be able to do that job or that task or see an initiative through. So it's a feeling of self-doubt. It's a feeling of anxiety, despite all the indicators suggesting that you can do whatever it is you've been tasked to do. It's that, I suppose it's that devil on your shoulder. It's that that whisper in your mind that is making you think that maybe you don't have what is needed. I suppose our conversation today is largely around what it is in an educational setting, but also how we might be able to combat it when it might rear its ugly head. But essentially, it's self-doubt. It's a really limiting syndrome. It was a phenomena in the beginning, 1978, when the phrase was first coined. But it can be really, really limiting and really damaging, actually, to our ability to do the things we're capable of doing at work.
And how do you think it manifests itself? I mean, have you got any experiences yourself of imposter syndrome in action, so to speak?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in coaching people, and I'm passionate about coaching and mentoring in schools. So I've seen it firsthand amongst colleagues a lot. But like you probably, Tom, I've also felt it myself many times. And when I was preparing to speak to you, I was thinking about my first, and I don't think I have crippling imposter syndrome. Don't get me wrong, I don't. But I was trying to think about when I first experienced this. Can I think about my first time when I experienced this? And I think the first time I experienced it was when I went to university. So I went to the University of Birmingham, a really well-established, reputable red brick university. And I remember my mum and dad dropped me off at the halls of residence, and there were 6 of us in a flat. And I was the only state school educated lad in that flat. The others had been to grammar school and private school. I don't think I knew what I was feeling then, but I'm sure that it had an impact on me. I'm sure it did, ultimately in a positive way. But that's my first experience that I can remember. More recently, I was teaching at a huge school when I was in Dubai. And then we used to put on these huge events, huge rewards evenings, and that fell under my remit. I had never hosted a show like that on a scale like that before. The head teacher felt I absolutely could deliver. I hoped I would, but deep down I was feeling really, really anxious about this, feeling lots of self-doubt. Irrespective of that, it had to be done. And I was able to do it, but I was really uncomfortable with it, and probably a little bit uncomfortable at the SLT table in the early days of my contract there as well, simply because I hadn't done it before and the people around the table had. So it's natural.
I was going to say,
it's something that helps us grow.
Is that just natural nervousness, though, or is that imposter syndrome?
I think it's natural nervousness until it begins to really affect your actual doing of your job. I've seen certain individuals that, on a good day, it's perhaps not imposter syndrome if it's just nerves that one can move past. But some people find it so difficult to get past. That self-doubt, that fear of failure, so prominent. It's at the forefront of their mind. On the odd occasion, I'm sure there are people that don't really ever get past it. They don't recover from it. So it's a thing. It's steeped in research. and it goes beyond those nerves.
I think, unfortunately, in teaching, and if we think particularly, if we go back in time a little bit, but actually any point to date, lesson observations, right? When lesson observations were commonly graded, it was really easy for a young teacher to have an experience in a lesson observation before they'd gained any real stability, confidence, before they'd really established themselves as a teacher, to get a really damning lesson grade and lesson observation. And from that point on, your chances, I would imagine, of experiencing imposter syndrome are going to be much higher, because it is probably linked to confidence. And I don't know whether imposter syndrome is a personal development issue, or is it something that is sort of not to do with personal development or confidence, but just a thing that you can have.
Like I said at the beginning, Tom, I think it's something we all have or can have. So it's not something I'm experiencing.
Some people would say they've had none, though. I had a guest a couple of weeks ago on TTR saying they've never experienced imposter syndrome, ever.
Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, I have. I must say that most of that has been when talking in front of other adults in school or somewhere else. That's where I felt imposter syndrome.
Perhaps it's helpful to view the way in which someone might feel it and the impact that it has, almost on a continuum or a spectrum. Yeah. So I would argue, I don't know the person that you spoke to, I would argue they've either forgotten it or it affected them to such a minimal extent. That's why they've forgotten it or they can't recall it. Some people at the other end of the spectrum, like I've said, it's debilitating. It's terrible. Most of us probably sit within that, that broad middle part of the bell curve. We can all recall, and maybe the term imposter syndrome is something that people are uncomfortable with. The idea of it being a syndrome or a condition or something like that. Perhaps that makes people think, oh, I've never felt that, or I've never suffered from that. I would argue perhaps we have, but we prefer to call it something different.
Yeah. If you're watching this live, by the way, everybody out there, and you yourself have an opinion on imposter syndrome in education, then drop us a comment on X, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, and we'll pop it up on the screen and we'll have a chat about that. I was going to ask you next, and we'll discuss with you next, the idea that imposter syndrome is particularly prevalent in education. Do you think that's true?
It's a good question. I don't think it's any more prevalent in education than it is in other fields. I wasn't always a teacher, and I can only speak from personal experience, Tom. Prior to this, I worked in recruitment. I worked for a short period. I worked in banking. In both of those sectors or industries, I'm confident it was present. It was there. I would imagine it's there in sport, sales, whatever industry you're in. I think it's there. Do I think it's worse in teaching, more acute in teaching? I don't think so. I'm still someone that believes, or like to believe, that in the vast majority of schools and educational settings, people are supportive. There's mentorship, there's encouragement, there's coaching, time is given, space is given for development. So I don't know is the answer in short, but I don't think we're any more susceptible than anybody else to these feelings. Perhaps we are at this time of year. I think September, the beginning of the autumn term, and I think that's why I wanted to speak to you in September. I think this time of year, when people are starting new jobs, new schools, they might have just been promoted. Some of your listeners might be feeling really uncomfortable with this new job they got, which seemed like a really good idea 3 or 4 months ago, and now all of a sudden they're at the table.
I mean, when I took a job on in a middle leadership role many years ago, and I felt a lot of imposter syndrome mixed with, I mean, I think part of it is when you don't feel sort of like you're part of something, like you're stable or safe within an environment. If you don't feel like that, I think there's a much higher chance that you're going to feel like you're an imposter in there, that you don't belong there, and that people are viewing you as somebody who is an outsider. Now, sometimes that can actually be true. If you have that intuition, sometimes that might not be something that you should be fighting. It should be something that you should be going, actually, let's assess to see if these feelings are based on reality or just based on your insecurity or nervousness or imposter syndrome in the situation, you know. But I think people who are going new into particular roles, particularly when they're working with teams, I think it's really challenging to overcome your sense of imposter syndrome, your sense that you're not good enough to do the role, that you don't belong in the role. And I've 100% experienced that before. I'm not sure I ever really got fully over that. I think I just adapted to it, and because you repeat processes over and over again, you just get used to it. But I wouldn't say I ever sort of went, "Oh yeah, I'm over that." And that was over a long period of time. So I think I am now, but that's only because we're talking years passing.
Yeah. I guess I think
do you have to know yourself well to avoid it? Do you have to know yourself as a human being well? Because if you know if you're comfortable with who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are, I think there's much less chance you're going to experience imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you know, you talked about people at the beginning of their career in teaching. You know, a judgment means absolutely everything. You think it's the be all and end all, don't you, in that first year of teaching or when you're training? Whereas, and it should be developmental, but 10 years later, you might receive a judgment, which might be your 50th observation. You know, it might be the 50th observation of your career, and by that point, experience has made you a better practitioner. But experience also tells you that you're not an imposter. This is fairly routine in schools. It should be constructive, any criticism that comes your way, and it should be developmental. So yeah, absolutely. I think one of the ways in which we combat these feelings, this imposter syndrome, is to feel really confident about what we're doing. You know, the times where I may have felt this earlier in my career, but I do not feel it now, are the times where I feel really well versed in what I'm talking about, or my presentation is really, really like on point. I'm proud of it. It's rooted in research. I'm clear about what I'm saying. I'm confident. It's times like that where I don't feel it. If, like you say, I feel I'm part of a new team, or I'm less experienced, or I'm thrust into a situation that I don't feel ready for, then I think perhaps it's natural to feel, you know, perhaps I don't deserve to be here. Maybe me being here, you know, this opinion is overvalued, all of those things. So yeah, I think confidence is a real good way of combating these thoughts, these whispers.
I mean, yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I think something that happens in the sort of education space sometimes is people are asked to do things that they think they should do, or they should be able to do, or they take it as a compliment. They've been asked to do it. So let's say it's like a CPD presentation or something on a particular subject, right? Now, if you are somebody who is self-aware and you know that you are not an expert on that topic or that issue, then one of two things. If you are someone who, because I think to suffer from imposter syndrome, that requires humility.
Yeah, vulnerability,
right?
Humility, totally agree.
Yeah, because to suffer, if you're suffering from that, that means that you're questioning yourself. So I think in that situation, you've got two people. You've got the one who's questioning themselves and saying, am I an expert on this? Now, they might be going too far with it and going, I know nothing about this.
Yeah.
But they might be valid in questioning, okay, am I expert enough to deliver this? Is this something that I actually want to do? is it something I'm actually good at doing? But obviously, somebody who suffers from imposter syndrome might take that more extreme as, I can't do this, I shouldn't be doing this, etc., etc., and that might not be true. On the other side of the fence, you've got people who may just, I mean, they may be experts in it or they may not be, but they've developed they just don't have that inner voice. Is that a good thing or a bad thing though? Like, if someone offers you an opportunity to do something,
well, first,
and don't question yourself before doing it.
I think first it depends on who's asking you, how well they know you, how well they know your competency.
That's true. Yeah.
If that person knows you, they believe in you, and even appreciates that you might not believe in yourself, then yeah, it might feel uncomfortable. Sometimes growth is uncomfortable. I would say in what we do, Tom, and I've worked in 3-4 schools, so I'm no expert, but I think it would be sad if it were the case that in schools, people were being asked to do things like CPD when they do not have the competence, the experience, or the confidence to deliver it. So I think that's something a little bit different to imposter syndrome. We'd all feel that. You know, if I was asked to present tomorrow afternoon on quantum physics to a group of people that knew about quantum physics, that's beyond imposter syndrome. That's just, I'm just clearly absolutely not the right person for that. So that's an extreme example. But I think it's probably pretty rare that people in schools are asked to do things where they have like absolutely no competency to do it. I think it's more likely these days, you know, I think the way education's gone, and earlier in my career, I was probably one of these people that was promoted really quickly, maybe too quickly. But it must have been the case then that the people that gave me the job or the jobs thought I at least had the core attributes to do it. But yeah, I accept what you're saying.
On the flip side, you're right in that a lot of teachers do themselves down, which is why, you know, I think there's a big issue across the profession of sort of teacher expertise being overlooked in favor of people who have expressed more confidence or have a higher profile because they've put themselves out there more. And one of the causes of that can be imposter syndrome, because teachers feel they don't belong in a space where people are sharing expertise. Now, I understand, I think there's various reasons, we can discuss them as to why that is, but I 100% think that is the reality. And that expresses itself further up the chain when people at leadership level or beyond say, oh, we've got an inset day. And they completely overlook the teacher who's had exemplary behavior, for example, in their own classroom for 10 years, because they never put themselves forward. And they put them sort of in the court. They don't even think about it. They don't even consider them. I think, oh, we're going to get an external consultant in who's written 5 books about behavior management or whatever, right? Now, that consultant, it's not saying that consultant might not be any good. It's more a point of so many teachers are just never get asked to do anything. But I actually think part of that is that they don't put themselves forward because of imposter syndrome. They don't think that they have the expertise to share in that space. Maybe not,
but maybe not. There's a couple of things I would say. When I was looking into and researching where this idea of a syndrome comes from, I read that there's something called attribution style, which I hadn't come across before. Apparently, it's something to do with psychology around the topic that we're talking about. And it's the idea that if, say, for example, you say to someone, oh, that presentation was absolutely fantastic, it was really insightful. I think a British teacher is likely to say, oh, got it off ChatGPT, or I got it off the TES, or I was lucky, or essentially they will look at all the other things that may have contributed to that great presentation other than their own expertise, their own competence. So I think that's not helpful. Maybe British teachers in particular Maybe we're wired that way, or some of us are anyway. But honestly, I think that the idea that this is a particular problem in educational teaching is not true. And actually, I think I mentioned quantum physics earlier. Albert Einstein called himself an involuntary swindler. So a Nobel Prize winning physicist suggested, I'm kind of bluffing my way through this. So it's not about ordinariness or ordinary people. It's, another story that I read in my preparation for our conversation was the fantasy author Neil Gaiman had gone to a gathering of people, authors, politicians, artists, and he recalls that he felt really inadequate amongst these people. He himself was an author, and a good one. And he turned around to the guy next to him at this meal. I said, I really don't think I should be here amongst these people. And the guy next to him said, do you know what? Me neither. I feel a bit uncomfortable. And that guy was Neil Armstrong, who had landed on the moon. So yes, some teachers will feel those things when they're not feeling confident, or when they haven't been chosen, or whatever. But even people that have achieved world fame, Nobel Prizes, landing on the moon, even they can feel at times like they don't quite belong.
Yeah. Do you think Donald Trump ever experiences imposter syndrome?
Well, it's on a spectrum, isn't it? Maybe President Trump's got his own spectrum.
Do you think he ever sits next to Buzz Aldrin and says, "What am I doing here?"
I don't think
do you think he's like quite comfortable to be there? Who knows? Who knows? I mean,
well, I wouldn't associate President Trump with humility very, very much.
Possibly.
Maybe that's unfair.
But all opinions are welcome here. By the way, and that is a good point for me to say, if you want to get involved in this chat, and thanks Paul for the comment. Paul has said, I don't have a great deal of experience of imposter syndrome. However, I would imagine seeing someone less experienced or less talented than yourself may be a helpful experience to help you move past it. I don't know about that. I mean, I guess it is. Although, I suppose, yeah. I mean, the problem with teaching is you actually, if you've got a full timetable, if you work in a classroom teacher or middle leadership role, you might not see or spend a sufficient amount of time watching someone else do their job for several years, if not at all. You might go into your room, close the door, teach a lesson, go to a meeting, as in a departmental meeting, staff meeting, go home, do a Twilight session, go home, teach another load of lessons. Now, schools have changed, a lot of them, and there is now more opportunity for peer observation, for example. There is more opportunity for cross-collaboration, like you mentioned, peer coaching, but that's slightly different because that's not observing someone necessarily doing a job, right? That's their coaching conversations. I'm more talking about watching a colleague teach. Now, that does happen more now than it used to, 100%, right? But I think that probably would have helped me if I'd have seen, for example, other leaders and managers doing the job that they're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas we do create a vision in our own heads of how good we are or not good we are or what we're doing. Yeah,
I think so. And I've worked with, at various times in the last 5 or 6 years, I've worked with colleagues who, I don't know, call it having difficulties with certain classes, having difficulties with staying on top of an outrageous marking load. Maybe it's an element of imposter syndrome if they're early in their career and, they're perhaps lacking some confidence. And what I try to say to them, one of the mantras I try to use when I'm coaching and mentoring ECTs and aspiring leaders, the way in which I try to view things is, I'm either winning or learning. Now, teaching's not really about winning and losing. It's a turn of phrase that I use. And what I mean by that, Tom, is if I'm winning, the observations are going really well. I'm getting recognition. I'm meeting my deadlines. I'm going home and I've got a little bit of energy to enjoy my evening, go to the gym or spend time with my children. But if those things aren't happening, if the observation didn't go well, or I had to get an extension on my deadline, or the presentation I delivered wasn't as succinct as I would have liked, it has to be considered a learning opportunity rather than a loss. That's the point I've always tried to make. It's an opportunity to grow. And I know it sounds cheesy and I know it sounds corny, but I do think we need to flip the script. And I do think we need to reframe those whispers I mentioned at the beginning. You know, if you're here, if you have a couple of bad observations, and you mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation, you might begin to think, oh, you know, perhaps I'm actually not cut out for this. And I thought it was my vocation. I did great at uni, and now all of a sudden I've got, you know, I've been told, I've been criticised for this, or at least that's how you've taken it.
Yeah.
It would be really, really helpful. And I had great mentors when I was training, and I'm sure in their own way they helped me flip the way I was thinking about these. But maybe that is the kind of thing that can help people move away from it, the low stakesness of things when it comes to observations or what have you.
Definitely. I mean, the best way to get through imposter syndrome is probably by doing it and sort of just sort of, you know, pushing
and I
it
think
away.
as well, Tom, whenever I've had self-doubt or anxiety about something, I have found it really helpful to genuinely to share the way I'm feeling with either my peers, people that maybe not working at the level I am in the school, and the people that have asked me to do the task. Genuinely, I find it really, really helpful. And again, I'm a believer that most of the people who work in schools love to share their mentorship. They love to share their experiences, and they want to help people, frankly. You know, teachers are a good bunch. They're a good bunch. And I think it will do no one any good to allow this level of self-doubt to take hold to the extent that you don't think you can talk about it. I still believe that you can, and people like.
I mean, how does it affect people in schools, though? I mean, is this about classroom teachers not feeling they can teach particular groups or teach at all? Is this about leaders not being able to feel they can present in front of staff? Is this like?
All of the above. Until an individual feels confident about their remit or their day job, they're inclined to feel these things. And I think this could affect an executive principal who in the first month.
I'll tell you what probably doesn't help with him. If you already suffer from imposter syndrome, I'll tell you something that probably might not help you is spending too much time on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think if you have a read of, and I'm bad for it, I really like LinkedIn, but if you
I like LinkedIn, but ultimately
some of the literature around this, Tom, it determines that imposter syndrome might be a result of two things. So psychological things like someone's propensity to feel anxiety or self-doubt or perfectionism. So striving for perfectionism means you're never going to reach it, so you're always going to feel it. But they also talk about environmental factors. So our upbringing, I spoke to you earlier about my university. So our upbringing, our university, our gender, our ethnicity, but also things like LinkedIn and comparison. If you LinkedIn, like the other social networks, is generally speaking a highlights reel for someone's career and what they're doing in their job. And if you're either directly comparing yourself or even subconsciously a comparison is being made, you're going to be thinking, oh God, that guy's writing a book about behavior management. I haven't done that.
But it's not just that, it's the subtle ones as well. Like when someone says, oh, I've been through this failure and then I worked incredibly hard and now I'm like uber successful, but the failure is like slipping over a banana peel once on the way to school or something. And you're like, well, that doesn't seem a massive failure. It seems quite moderate compared to the failures I've had, which might be like not huge, but bigger. So I think social media, I think LinkedIn's a bad one for that. I like LinkedIn because it's fantastic for connecting to lots of, we talked about this last few weeks ago on TTR as well. I think LinkedIn's great as a connectivity site. I think to connect to people and to connect to serious professionals who are looking to push on, I think it's great. I think the downside of it is highlights reel. I think there's not much conversation that's maybe sometimes a bit more authentic. I think other sites, whether you like them or not, like Facebook or X or maybe some other sites, maybe lend themselves a little bit more to being a bit more authentic.
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
LinkedIn, because it's a professional network and it markets itself as such, people feel that I'm not saying it's unprofessional to be authentic, but people, I almost feel like LinkedIn adds 10 to 20% where you're like, I've got to be a bit glossy.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally agree.
Speak in a certain way and do things a certain way. But anyway, we digress. But I think that 100%, I've met people, chatted to people, loads of people have come through TTR, just as one example. And one of the things that many people have said is, I haven't written a blog, I haven't written a book, I haven't been on a podcast, I haven't got a big social following, I haven't spoken at an event, I haven't done, and the list goes on and on and on. I haven't. And then it's like sitting in front of you, you've got someone who has been teaching for 20 years successfully in a really tough environment. And this is why we do, in my opinion, we do have a little bit of a problem in the teaching profession around how we build people's confidence. Now, some of that is systemic because you have organizations around, and again, this is, my views on Ofsted are well documented, but this isn't actually necessarily a view on Ofsted per se. I'm just using them as an example of the structures and systems around education in England as an example, where it's high stakes. There are certain levers, the performance tables, stuff like that. As school leaders, it puts you in competition with other people. There'll be some who will turn around and say, well, that's life. Competition culture is life. But for me, education and teaching should be something that people are allowed to just enjoy doing. And educate. If you've got kids in a classroom and you feel on edge and you feel like you've got to prove yourself every single day, 6 hours every day, you got to prove yourself.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to give your best as a teacher, partly because you'll be too stressed, too much pressure that you're going to be putting on yourself. So my question to you was going to be, how can school leaders or leadership teams, what type of leadership helps teachers who suffer from imposter syndrome? Because ultimately the leaders might not know that they do because they'll hide it quite well.
Probably the kind of leader that appreciates this is something very real and something that has a really negative impact on the children that are being taught, and probably the kind of leader that remembers that is what we do. That's what our business is. And I think perhaps sometimes leaders need to just take a step back and think, hang on, what are we doing here again? Why have we come to work today? Oh yeah, that's our raison d'etre. That's why we're doing this. And I think in the fast-paced humdrum of a school day, school week, a half term, preparation for this inspection or that visit, sometimes that very obvious thing, the thing right in front of us, can be lost. So I think the kind of leader who's prepared to just say, oh yeah, that's what we're doing here. It goes without saying that a leader dealing with teachers who might be feeling those things that you described, they need to be truly empathetic. They need to be really, really patient. They need to remember why they hired the person in the first place, how they did. And remember that, that person, 99.9% of the time, that person is giving 100% effort. They are absolutely doing their best.
Yeah.
I've never met a teacher who has turned up to work without wanting to do their very, very best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I once put that on, and some of them more negative. I once put something like that on Twitter once, and I remember the only negative responses to that, the only responses that said, "No, you're wrong," this teacher, were from parents who didn't work in the school. right?
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
the vast majority of the teachers who responded were like, I've not met a teacher who is not putting in near to maximum effort every day.
I was going to. I should have said as well. Like, I think something that perhaps I didn't mention that is really underrated amongst leaders is approachability. You know, there were times in the last couple of years I went to my head teacher, who I found really approachable. I was able to be vulnerable and open with her. I think she respected that openness, that honesty, that vulnerability, that humility. But it created an understanding and a patience on her part and a want on her part to help me. I'm coming to you because I want to do better. I want to do the thing you've asked me to do better. I'm struggling to get to that place. I'm being open and honest with you. And to be met with compassion at times like that. And for me to be able to feel like I could go to her feeling those things was actually really empowering and confidence building in me. So perhaps approachability is one that I didn't say that I should have done.
I think to get that from a leadership perspective, though, the leader has to be vulnerable. They've got to expose their own sort of, not necessarily weaknesses, but they've got to show their personality, right?
Yeah.
If they're too corporate, then that's not going to lend itself towards somebody thinking, yeah, you know what, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tell them not just, oh, I'm having a bit of a bad day, but stuff that's really bothering me.
Yeah, although I agree. Although I would say I was talking specifically about head teacher there, but earlier on in my career, I've been able to go to middle leaders, and have that, be all of those things with a middle leader. So it doesn't just rest with a head teacher who, frankly, might feel they have to be corporate. They might feel that. I've not been in that position.
That's why I said about the systemic side of this, because these people are under immense pressure, right? And they have to. They're under. Sometimes they can literally lose their job if they don't. So, they're under massive pressure. So, yeah, totally. Like some of them have to put the game face on to a great extent. But someone like I'm thinking of head teacher. I've not worked with this head teacher, but I've spent a bit of time with them, and I'd imagine someone like a Vic Goddard, for example, as a head teacher, would be somebody who I feel. I haven't worked with him, but I feel if he was in his office, I would feel I could knock on the door and talk to him about anything that I needed to.
Yeah,
be honest, be candid, and not feel any sort of threat or danger from doing so.
And
I'd say those leaders are sometimes quite hard to find. Actually, I think that those
perhaps.
leaders, I don't think a huge amount of those leaders around. I think there's some.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the office there. I think the office itself can be intimidating. I understand that.
Yeah.
Staff.
I mean, my one of my head teachers, Thomas, you'll like this. It was my first day in a job, right? They asked all the new teachers to come to their office and show them their teacher planner, handwritten planners, with all the lessons that they planned for the next 2 weeks in them, and read out those in front of all the other new teachers. Right? That sort of thing isn't going to help someone who suffers from imposter syndrome or has any sort of comparative mindset going on because they've just started a job. And you're in a room with other people of a similar level to you.
I wonder what the desired outcome was of that exercise.
Trip people up because
in order to.
I only remember why the meeting happened and what happened in the meeting. I don't remember what happened after the meeting. I don't remember any conversations after it. But I remember the meeting. I remember.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
I felt uncomfortable, and that wasn't because necessarily. It was more that expectation and stuff like that, and again that sort of comparative thing, and I felt uncomfortable more for the environment it was creating than anything else. But like I said, that leader, it's probably much less likely that I would have gone to speak to him about.
I understand. Yeah, of course.
On that first few weeks, because it's like I'm worried.
Yeah, in a school for a leader like that, imposter syndrome in that school is going to be very real and very inhibiting, and very, very limiting. And unfortunately, the knock-on effect of that is that the children are going to make less progress than they should. End of.
Yeah,
and it goes back to that. It goes back to that. Why we're here again?
Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in, by the way, so far. 250 live views. So thanks for checking in on us this evening. I know you'll be busy. So thanks for spending a bit of time. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, you know what, this is me, then we hope it's helpful, because the likelihood is that you're trying your absolute damned hardest every day. That's number one. And you can only ever just try your best. And number two, it's probably the way you feel is probably more to do with the situation, the context, the other people around you, than any failure on your part, particularly if you're new in a job, because you've just started. I mean, probably haven't had a chance to actually do anything yet. So yeah, I think teachers, like I said, should have more confidence in their own abilities, but it's difficult within the framework that we work in. Because I was going to chat with you in a minute about how exposed teachers are. You think about every day in teaching, there are so many chances for you to feel bad about yourself. There really are, because you're in a classroom, you're completely exposed. There's loads, you've got to make 1,000 decisions a day. It's highly likely you're going to make a bad decision at some point in a day. And then it's about how much you beat yourself up on it.
Yeah, well, it's about owning that, accepting that's par for the course. And I said this earlier, you're not losing, you're just learning at those times. There's opportunities in all of those difficult moments. It doesn't feel like it at the time, and I appreciate it, Tom. It probably sounds kind of cheesy and corny and all of that, but it really is true. There are many times where at that moment I'm like, oh, this is a nightmare. I'm under so much pressure. I'm really struggling to deliver this thing or whatever it is. And it might take days, it might take a few weeks to realize the learning in that. But it will build you. It will make you grow as a leader, as a teacher, as a character. It will do all of those things, even when you don't know it. And imposter is not a byword for inexperience. You're allowed to be inexperienced, like that doesn't mean you're an imposter. It just means you're brand new to the job.
Sure, 100%. Good opportunity for me to thank our sponsors again. We've got Hachette Learning, if you haven't heard of them, formerly known as John Catt. Books, resources, anything on that ilk that you're after in terms of CPD, head over to the Hachette Learning website, check it out, order yourself a book or two. Chalk and Talk podcast by Anna Stokey is a podcast that we are recommending at the moment on Teachers Talk Radio for you to check out. If you haven't heard of it, it's lots of conversations about evidence-informed practice from Anna, who's based over in Canada. So definitely we recommend checking out the Chalk and Talk podcast on whatever podcast player that you like or prefer. And finally, AQA. If you're a teacher out there who's looking for resources to help you with the new academic year, then we highly recommend heading over or searching AQA. We work with experts via Google, having a look at what they've got to offer. They work with teachers just like you, resources, tools, training, guidance. All of this is available, and they're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation. So we highly recommend checking out what AQA have to offer this year. They've got a whole new raft of resources and support on their website there. So head over there. And if you want to get involved in the conversation, thanks to those who have so far, then please feel free to drop us a comment about if you're experiencing imposter syndrome. You might not want to say, but if you are, then don't worry about it. Just chill. I mean, one of my phrases, Tom, is just chill the hell out. I just think teaching's so highly strung. Everyone just needs to chill the hell out. Honestly, it's mad.
Like I've said, if one takes a step back from any given situation in a school day, you actually can probably find some humour in it most of the time.
There's strategies you can use for yourself to deal with it. But I think in general terms, it's don't
be an island. Don't be an island. You know, your colleagues or people are, you know, in the edusphere. Is that the word they use sometimes? There's so many people,
LinkedIn sphere,
X, whatever, that want to help.
Well, they used to call it edu Twitter, but it's not really edu Twitter anymore. It's
edu-X, right? Yeah,
whatever you want to call it.
If any listeners,
does LinkedIn have a thing? I mean, there's teachers of TikTok, teacher talk.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Too good for that, Thomas. Too good.
Yeah,
too good to use TikTok. Okay, strategies then. Let's try and think of some strategies for someone who is suffering from imposter syndrome.
I think any given person needs to, and I said it at the beginning, it's less of a strategy, it's more of a mindset. Remember that you were chosen for that job for various reasons. Normally, even people, and I've been one of these people, even people who think, I only got the job because no one else wanted it. I've been in that position and thought those things. But that goes back to that attribution style we talked about. Oh, anything but me. I was just lucky. There was no other candidates. No. The reason you got that job or you've been given that responsibility is because someone, a decision maker, believes in your ability to do it. So it's less of a strategy, it's more of a mindset. I'm not someone who does this, but I have colleagues in the past that absolutely swear by journaling, manifestations and stuff like this. This is not for me right now, but there's loads of reading to be done. There's loads of resources that someone who's experiencing this in a bad way, they can think outside the box and think about that. Because like I said, the likelihood is you're absolutely capable of doing these things, you know.
And also it's like, if you look back at what you've achieved, what you've survived, what you've done up to any point, it's like, why shouldn't I be able to do this?
You survived 100% of your most difficult days.
This is it. I saw that on LinkedIn just yesterday.
There you go.
I didn't really, but I could have. But no, seriously, I mean, that's 100%. It's about looking at that. I mean, one of the things I have done is I've kept sort of all the literature I've had of kids over the years. I've kept a lot of it in a folder. So if I'm sort of, and you know, I think the more experience you get, maybe the less you feel you need to do it. But sometimes it is helpful to go back to that, look at it, look at the impact, look at the way the connections you've had, you know, because sometimes you can go to a new school and you go, all these kids hate me. It can happen. You can go there and go, I don't fit in here. The kids hate me. And that can then go into the way you teach. I've been there and it's crap. It's crap. Because you go and I've done it, 3 times in 3 different schools or whatever it might be up to this point. Then you go in somewhere and it's like, it's not working. So that's where you have to turn and go, sometimes you do have to look at it and go, this is a cultural thing. This isn't necessarily on you. You know, you can try different things, but one of the things you might do to reassure yourself is go back to whatever that is, that folder, those things, those experiences, even in your head, and go, well, what happened when you left your last school? What happened at, you know, in the assembly when you left the last school? You know, how did the kids respond? It can't all be, you know, that can't have been a fluke. You know, that's something you've built over time. So try and remember that.
You mentioned that this had happened in your career. You thought, you know, they all hate me. I'm not totally unpopular. I'm not rated.
I mean, maybe not all, but
okay, but fine.
A lot of them. I
would put a lot of money on the fact that you weren't the only person ever to have worked at that school to have felt those things.
Sure.
There will have been numerous people in the building that would have been able to say, Tom, do you know what? I've been here 18 months now and I'm no longer feeling those things. It's tough at the beginning.
I think the problem is often, yeah. I think in that particular situation that I was in, I think that it was a strange context, but I think a lot of the right. I mean, imagine a school where you can have teachers. You can have this in any school actually, but where like they think that where it's not even about teaching. It's just about being mates with the kids, right? And I think in fairness, in international education, I think there's a higher chance this can happen because I think you can get rogue schools, you can get very small schools, you can get a certain level of potential unprofessionalism. I don't think a lot of the conversation about international schools, I don't think there's enough focus on that, right? It can be like the Wild Wild West, right? In those situations, so I understand what you're saying, right? And that's also probably still true. But but sometimes it can feel like you are the only one. Right. And sometimes you've got to go back to yourself and go, right. And again, comparison is terrible in any situation, but particularly that one. Because you're going, they're having a laugh in there. Well, that might be because that teacher's not doing the job. That might be because they just have a laugh with them every day. They don't actually teach them anything. It could be a whole range of reasons. This
also might not relate very closely to imposter syndrome. It might simply be, this place is not a good fit for me. My ethics, my approach is just not a very good match for this place, this business. Right. That's okay.
Do you know what? Right, and then it's having the confidence to just go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
just leave.
Yeah, I'm not an imposter. This is just not a great fit for me.
100%. And do you know what? Sometimes people, and I agree with this, like work with try and join a school that matches your values. But I'm sorry, sometimes you won't know it until you're in there.
Yeah.
The values can be written on the website, and actually, what's happening inside that's the difference. Tracy's commented, thank you, Tracy. Teaching is a journey, a learning journey. We're in it for the long haul. Imposter syndrome comes and goes through the journey. I was a head teacher for 10 years, still had imposter syndrome loads. Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah. It's and like I said, it can be situational. If you don't feel you've got if you don't feel you've got the support, if you don't feel you've got the trust, if you don't feel that you're part of it on a genuine level, anybody, I think, can experience that imposter syndrome. Anybody. It doesn't matter how strong your personality is or what experience you've got. I mean, I've just given you that example. I've taught successfully, in inverted commas, in like 3 or 4 schools prior to that. Didn't make any difference. It didn't make any difference to how I felt about what was going on. Now some of that wasn't imposter syndrome, but it will make you doubt yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Schools can make you doubt yourself. Toxic schools can make you doubt yourself. Different situations and things can make you doubt yourself as a teacher, as a leader, as a person, as whatever. So it's like it's like we said, strategies. You've mentioned some de-stress stuff. I've read a bit of, one of my mates actually said about mindfulness and how much that's helped him recently.
Yeah.
And he's really plugged into that, and he started to really see benefits from that. And he does it like 10 minutes every day. He tries to sort of meditate mindfulness. He tries to practice mindfulness, let's say, through his life rather than just doing it as a task, right? But that's really worked for him. So de-stress activities maybe, but also I think the bigger one is, like you said, believing in your own ability, knowing what you've done to get where you are. People forget what they've done. And like I said, the profession can help itself by not elevating certain people and then other people just overlooking them. That's not helping people with imposter syndrome. That's not helping people to build their confidence, is it? If we're going, we've got these people who are in schools who are doing this, this, and this, but we're always looking on the outside for the experts. Why is that? Explain that to me, Thomas. Why the heck is that? Is that LinkedIn's fault? Is that social media's fault? Because
Possibly there's an element of keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah. Or a feeling that if we're not doing this thing as a school, we're going to fall behind.
Yeah, sure.
Or you know, I'm a big believer. Very often, any one individual in a school, they're never going to have all the answers. But I would suggest that 99% of what's needed is probably already in the building, one way or another.
This is what I mean. This is what I mean, right? But people say that, but then I mean, I know situations where schools have gone to a CPD company, right? And they said, "Can we get a session on X?" And the CPD company have offered somebody, and they've gone, "No, we want that other person because they've got loads of followers, and they've written books, and they've got this and they've got that." Now that's like an extra layer on top of what we're talking about. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing, right? Yeah. But it's like, how do you break that chain? I think one of the ways you break that chain is by just saying, right, I'm gonna start bringing people through. It's a little bit like, I love football analogies in education. I absolutely love it. But it's a little bit like saying, we've got an academy and we've got loads of guys in the academy who are playing really well, developing really well, but we're not going to give them a chance on the biggest stage. We're not going to give them a chance on the biggest stage because we can buy whoever for 50 million quid.
Yeah.
Who we think is better because they've got a higher profile, because but they might not be. They might not be. Right? It's like, you don't know. So it's like, why not look inside your own stable and a bit more? I mean, sometimes there's a place, of course, for looking outside and going, let's bring a bit of a sprinkling of something in, you know, into the event, into what we're doing, and that makes perfect sense. Or an outside pair of eyes. I get all of that. But when it comes to sheer regular CPD for teachers, what about looking internally a bit more?
I'm all for it. Yeah. I'm all for it.
That's my rant, Thomas. That really felt cathartic.
Yeah, well, I listened.
Yeah. Anyway, we've more or less finished. I say finished. We could probably talk about this all day. What would be your to make right? I mean, okay, school level, individual level. What are the things that can help an individual? We've talked about strategies. We've sort of covered that a little bit, but how can schools better? How can schools or the system better help people with this thing we call imposter syndrome?
To recognise that it's a thing, to own it, to equip people with some of the vast research that exists around it, to remind people in that particular school that this is not just them. You know, we've talked about Einstein and Neil Armstrong feeling self-doubt and it hindering whatever they were doing. So own it, recognise it, lean into it, and lean into the growth potential that is there for it, rather than allowing people to, as individuals, begin to question their whole career choices. You know, it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't need to be like that. It should be. And there's so many great, you know, TED Talks. There's great books that aren't about, you know, it might not have imposter syndrome in the title, but it will make for more confident, self-aware practitioners, which in the end is going to build confidence, which will minimize the impact of this imposter syndrome that we've been talking about.
Sure. No, brilliant. Listen, Thomas, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about imposter syndrome in education. If anybody has any comments or thoughts on this, then feel free to get in touch with us at Teachers Talk Radio, ttradio.org. You can just drop us a line if there's anything you've taken from it. I have to say thanks to everybody who's joined in the comments, people like Paul and Debbie and Alison who joined in, and anybody else who's just been watching along and has gained something from the conversation. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Of course, this will be available as a podcast as well in a few days' time. So check that one out wherever you get your podcasts from, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is. We just hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube the other day. So little milestone there for us. So thank you very much to everyone who subscribes to us on YouTube. Please head over there and hit like and subscribe if you don't already. follow us over there. We're actually back in 55 minutes, Thomas. So the fun does not stop because we've got Claire and Bijesh on in about 55 minutes. There's a head teacher who's approachable. Claire, she's brilliant. You know, she's very down to earth and very approachable and great to talk to. And I think she'd be fantastic to work for. So there you go. I've given you another example of somebody.
I'll give it a listen, Tom.
Yeah, it's on at 8. It's on Spaces on X, but you don't need an X account to listen to it, so you can just listen to it anywhere.
Sure.
So I'll be tuning in. That's in 55 minutes. Great duo that is Claire and Bijesh. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be back again. Well, possibly on Monday actually, Monday night at 6. But yeah, it's been great checking in with everyone, and take care. See you everyone. Bye bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intense